Hi, this is Brett Hall, Athens State University student in CE 520 Aligning CTE curriculum. This was spring semester. This is my assignment 7 curriculum presentation roll-up. Introduction, a little bit about myself. I work at Lockheed Martin as a manufacturing engineering manager, and the curriculum that I chose to work on for this semester assignment was in Space Production Operations Electronic Assembly Training. It's a module within my work area that will address some hiring and training difficulties that we've recently seen. A little bit because we have a high number of senior level technicians that are very skilled, have a lot of tribal knowledge that will be retiring soon. And then also we've seen excessive job growth in our area, so we want to develop a new pipeline to bring in new talent and skilled workforce. So for the first part of the process analysis, laid out into the phases of planning, content, method, implementation, and evaluation and reporting. And for that, I looked at a little bit about the outline, generating the clear graphical chart, and comparing and contrast the different curriculum development processes. And for the process that I chose that kind of best aligned with the curriculum that I thought that we would need, which is a little bit of, instructional material and OJT, was a more of a systematic approach where each step in the process it built on the previous one as we take them from, the learning curve of being very simplistic in nature of developing of the cutting the wire all the way up to the more complex operations that they would have to do. So it builds upon each phase. But even though most steps did occur in sequential order, there were some that would occur concurrently. So I divided that up into these 12 steps and then grouped into the 4 phases that I mentioned earlier. The next step was the content standards analysis. We had several different standards, both industry, state, and some internal corporate standards. Primarily some of the J standards, which is an industry standard for a lot of the aerospace or soldering of electrical and electronic assemblies and space applications. Some of the state standards with the AIDT, State Pre-Employment and Selection and Training, that we had to kind of put into place to help develop and pull from the local pipeline. And then corporate standards, we have a lot of internal electrostatic discharge and environmental safety and health and packaging and transportation standards. And that was assignment 2 throughout the semester, and we developed that and list each type standard and sections that applied from some of the NASA, even the OSHA Act that also applied, and again the corporate and internal. And then I'd kind of map that and how it would flow into the standard curriculum and modules directly, and what areas from a common core, fundamentals, intro, a lot of the technical writing and safety that goes along with those. And then into the specialties with wire prep, crimping, solder, and that's where a lot of the industry and the internal standards would apply. Next up was developing the task analysis, overflow, and mapping. And for that, we started at the highest level of the functions. That was assignment 3. And we looked at the functions or the prerequisites going into this, and technician is our primary student, and several resources went into this module to support that. But when we look at the functional areas of wire processing, connector processing, harness, and test, then that would go into the next level of each specific task of wire cutting, stripping, crimping, and soldering. Then it got into the detailed steps that the curriculum must address as you move to the instructional into the OJT of getting your kit, spool, cutter, and wire for the wire cutting. And then each task was broken down into specific steps with the wire stripping, crimping, and some of the steps were the same for each task. Some of them were a little unique once you get into some of the tests. Wire soldering, connector processing starts to next task, then get into detailed steps. Go to the next task, wire harness, and getting into each step, and it just keeps blowing out each, I guess, sub-module. Tape route, overbraid, and get into test processing, and it was a little different prerequisites, different resources, inputs and outputs, and perform the test. And then we have two different options depending on what test equipment you have, and we will go through each one of those options with each technician and the submission of data. So that covers the task analysis. For goals, outcomes, and objectives, use a rubric type layout to talk to that. And then for the technician levels that we'll be training to, we have 4 primary levels. Again, level 4 is the most senior level that we have. That we have a lot of that workforce that's retiring, which kind of prompted the need for this curriculum and talent pipeline. So majority of the students that will be going through this module will be at a level 1, maybe level 2, just to bring them in, get them acclimated with the basic requirements, and then as they go from level 2 to level 3, getting some more of that OJT and mentorship from the more senior levels. But this curriculum will specifically address getting those certifications that go along with those standards. But it will be tailored a little bit as they progress from level 2 to 3 to get more in depth in each one of those tasks that we just talked about. The content unit development is where we started laying out some of the prerequisites and competencies that would go into this, tying them back to the standards, and upon completion of the curriculum module, what level the student would be prepared to work to, and then also be tested and certified to. So for each module, we laid out the objectives, the reading materials that would go along with that, and the assessment assignments for each individual module. So for safety, we have some high-level objectives here with industry and occupational safety, some PPE, ESH, and ESD objectives. Reading material, each module reading material is broken down starting with the standard, but also the applicable sections for this unique module, because some of the standards will apply across multiple modules, but within each standard only specific sections talks to this module, and then the assessment assignment will tie back to each objective. So module 1 was safety. Module 2, wire processing. Again, you see individual standard sections tying specifically to that module. Module 3, connector processing, and this maps back to those tasks that we just went through on the flow chart. Next up, instructional strategies. So again, it goes back to we've got the same objectives, reading material, and assessment assignments. But at the next level, we'll talk about specific instructional materials that we'll utilize within each module to meet these objectives and be able to assess the student properly. For this instructional materials, I followed the ARA 3 criteria layout to ensure that we were properly addressing each material focus area and material requirements. And primarily the instructional materials used is lecture, narrated, and interactive digital media for that module. And then for the actual processing module, we get more into the hands-on and lab to perform all the objectives. In conclusion, how could this curriculum be used by you or others? Since we are about 60 to 70% industry standards, so this curriculum maps back to that. So within the aerospace community, there are other corporations out there that works to those same standards, since they're a NASA spec. A lot of government contracts will work to those specs. So I think not only us internal, but I think others could benefit from this curriculum. And what have I learned throughout this class and building this curriculum? Maybe how the modules and the material is developed in phases and stages to build upon each other is definitely something that I learned. And what would I do differently? I would, if I was going to, and probably will go back and revise this curriculum, is to break it up into more sub-modules. I think that this, as I started out thinking that it would just be 1 or 2 areas or 2 modules, it grew to about 8 or 9 modules. But then I was trying to map them all together. I think that this could probably be broken up into maybe 2 different curriculums, with looking at the, I guess, the overview with the safety and ESH type items as one, and then getting into the OJT as a second curriculum. And these are the reference listed that wrote up into each sub-assignment and leading up to this final project. Thanks.